It was a cold morning in February when I made the decision that would change my life. I had been living in the United States for 3 months, and every day felt like a small battle. I could understand a few English words, hi, thank you, sorry, but whenever someone tried to talk to me, my mind went blank. I smiled, nodded, and prayed they wouldn't ask me anything else. I still remember one embarrassing moment at the grocery store. The cashier asked, "Do you want paper or plastic?" I froze. I had no idea what she meant. People in line started to stare, and I just whispered, "Yes." She looked confused. I walked out of the store with my heart pounding, thinking, I can't live like this anymore. That night, sitting in my small apartment, I made a promise to myself, in 5 months, I will speak English. Not perfectly, not like a native, but enough to survive, to connect, and to feel confident. I didn't have money for an English school. I was working part-time washing dishes at a small diner in New Jersey. My schedule was tough, 10-hour shifts, mostly nights. But I had time between work, and I decided that every free minute would go to English. I opened YouTube, searched how to learn English fast, and watched video after video. Everyone had different advice, grammar rules, vocabulary lists, speaking practice. My notebook filled with messy notes and words I didn't understand, but the truth was, I had no clear plan. Just a burning desire. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and saying out loud, 5 months from now, you'll speak English. You'll tell your story in English. It sounded impossible then. But that sentence, that promise, became the fire that started everything. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had to, but because something inside me had changed. I made a cup of coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and opened my notebook. At the top of the first blank page, I wrote in big letters, English is everywhere. That became my rule. If I was going to learn this language in 5 months, I had to live it. I started by changing my phone's language to English. It felt strange, suddenly, even simple things like settings or notifications looked like puzzles. But I forced myself to figure them out. I told myself, every confusion is a new word waiting to be learned. At work, the diner was full of sounds, dishes clinking, people laughing, waitresses calling out orders. Most of the customers spoke fast English, but I started to listen differently. I began writing down phrases I heard, even if I didn't understand them. Coming right up. Can I get a refill? No worries. Later, on my bus ride home, I'd look them up on my phone and whisper them quietly to myself. I also started watching English shows with subtitles every night. At first, I watched Friends, because everyone said it was easy to understand. It wasn't easy at all. I paused every 5 seconds, rewound scenes, and repeated lines until I could say them smoothly. My favorite line became, "How you doing?" I said it every morning to the mirror, laughing at my own accent. Music became my secret teacher. I downloaded songs, wrote down the lyrics, and sang along. One night, a coworker heard me mumbling a Justin Timberlake song in the kitchen and laughed. "Your accent's getting better," he said. It was the first time anyone had noticed. That small comment gave me a huge boost of confidence. Soon, English surrounded me and my phone, my music, my thoughts. Even when I was tired, I tried to think in English. When I didn't know a word, I described it to myself instead of translating. For example, if I forgot broom, I said, "the thing you use to clean the floor." It was exhausting at first. My brain hurt. Sometimes I wanted to give up. But every night, when I opened my notebook and saw how many new words I had written, I felt proud. Slowly, my world was becoming English, not just something I studied, but something I lived. By the end of the first month, I had filled an entire notebook with words and phrases. I could understand more and more, especially when watching TV or listening to songs. But there was still one big problem. I wasn't speaking. I could read, listen, and even think in English, but when I tried to open my mouth, fear took over. My heart would beat fast, my hands would shake, and the words would disappear. One night, after finishing my shift at the diner, I sat alone at the bus stop. I felt frustrated. What's the point of learning all these words if I can't use them? I realized something simple but powerful: you don't learn to speak by studying. You learn to speak by speaking. The next day, I made a new rule: no more silence. At work, I started greeting everyone in English. Good morning, Sarah. How's your day, Mike? At first, my co-workers smiled politely, maybe a little surprised, but they responded kindly. Those short exchanges became my daily practice. One afternoon, a customer asked me, "Where are you from?" For a second, I panicked, then I remembered my promise. I smiled and said, slowly, "I am from Colombia. I am learning English." He grinned. "That's awesome, man. You're doing great." That was the first real English conversation I ever had. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like I had climbed a mountain. After that, I started looking for every chance to speak. On the bus, I asked people for directions. At the store, I asked workers where things were, even when I already knew. Sometimes people didn't understand me, and I had to repeat myself. My accent was strong, and I made many mistakes. But every time, I reminded myself, every mistake is one step closer to fluency. At home, I practiced speaking out loud to myself. I described everything I was doing: I'm cooking rice. I'm cleaning the floor. I'm tired, but I'm happy. It felt silly at first, but slowly, English started to sound natural in my mouth. One day, my manager asked if I could take an order from a customer because everyone else was busy. My stomach dropped, but I said yes. I walked up to the table, smiled, and said, "Hi, what would you like today?" My voice trembled a little, but I did it. The customer ordered a cheeseburger and fries. I repeated it to confirm, and he understood me perfectly. That night, when I got home, I almost cried, not from fear this time, but from pride. It was the first time I truly used my English in the real world. For the first time, my voice didn't belong to fear. It belonged to me. By the second month, my progress was visible. I could order food, chat a little at work, and even understand some jokes on TV. But the excitement started to fade. The truth was, learning English was harder than I ever imagined. I was exhausted. My routine was the same every day: wake up, study English, go to work, come home tired, and study again. At first, it felt exciting, like a mission. But slowly, my motivation started to disappear. One morning, I looked at my notebook and felt nothing. No energy, no focus, just frustration. The words didn't make sense anymore. My brain felt full, but my mouth still hesitated when I spoke. I started thinking, maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe 5 months is impossible. At work, people spoke fast, laughed, and made jokes I couldn't understand. I smiled politely, pretending to follow. But inside, I felt invisible. One of my co-workers, Jason, noticed. He asked, "Hey, man, you okay?" I forced a smile and said, "Yes, I'm fine." But I wasn't. That night, I walked home under the cold wind, thinking about giving up. I had dreams of speaking fluently, but now it felt like a fantasy. I opened YouTube again, looking for some kind of motivation. I found a video of a man who said, "If you're tired, it means you're growing. Every mistake is proof that you're trying." Those words hit me hard. I realized I wasn't failing, I was learning. I just needed to rest, not quit. The next day, I decided to change my approach. Instead of pushing myself too hard, I focused on enjoying English. I watched funny videos, listened to podcasts about topics I loved, and started reading short stories, not textbooks. When I didn't understand something, I didn't panic. I just guessed the meaning and moved on. I also started writing short daily journals in English. Simple sentences like "Today was hard, but I didn't give up." I spoke with 2 people at work. I learned 5 new words. Writing helped me see my small victories. A few weeks later, something amazing happened. I realized I could understand entire conversations at work. I didn't catch every word, but I got the meaning. For the first time, I felt part of the group. Yes, the struggle was real, but so was the progress. That month taught me one of the most important lessons of my journey: fluency doesn't come from perfection. It comes from persistence. By the third month, my world was changing. My English wasn't perfect, but it was alive. I could speak, understand, and even joke, sometimes. But more than grammar or vocabulary, I started realizing something powerful. People were my best teachers. At the diner, my co-workers became part of my classroom. Sarah, the waitress, was one of the first people who really helped me. She was funny and talked a lot, maybe too much sometimes, but she always encouraged me to answer back. When I said something wrong, she corrected me kindly. Not "I am here since morning," she'd say. "You should say, I've been here since morning." Then she'd smile and say, "You're getting better, you know." Her encouragement made a big difference. Every correction wasn't a mistake to be ashamed of, it was progress. Jason, the cook, had a different style. He taught me slang. "What's up?" "That's cool." "You nailed it." I wrote them down on small sticky notes and practiced them during breaks. I even made a slang wall in my tiny apartment. Every time I learned a new one, I added it to the wall like a trophy. Outside of work, I started to push myself more. I joined a free English conversation group at the public library. The first time I went, I was terrified. There were people from all over the world: China, Brazil, Mexico, India, all speaking English with different accents. At first, I felt lost. But then I realized nobody was perfect, and nobody cared. We were all trying. We talked about everything: food, family, music, even our dreams. I laughed, I listened, and most importantly, I spoke. Every session felt like a step forward. Sometimes I also practiced English with customers. One older man who came to the diner every morning noticed my effort. One day he said, "You're improving fast, kid. Keep talking, that's how you'll get there." I'll never forget that moment. It felt like the world was cheering for me. The more I talked to people, the more confident I became. Grammar rules I used to struggle with started to make sense naturally. It was like the language was finally connecting inside my head. That month, I stopped memorizing long lists of vocabulary. Instead, I learned through real conversations. Every word had a memory, a face, a story. I realized then that English wasn't something you learn from books, it's something you learn through people. And for the first time, I didn't just study English. I lived it. Even though I was improving, a part of me was still afraid of saying something wrong, afraid of being laughed at. Every time I opened my mouth, I worried that my accent or grammar would make people judge me. That fear followed me everywhere: at work, on the bus, even in my dreams. Then, one morning, something happened that changed everything. It was a busy Saturday at the diner. The place was full, and I was helping take orders. A woman asked for sunny-side-up eggs, but I didn't know what that meant. I repeated her words, confused. Sunny side up. She smiled kindly and pointed to the menu. "It means the eggs are cooked on one side only," she explained. I felt my face turn red. "Oh. Okay. Sorry," I said quickly, trying to laugh it off. But inside, I was embarrassed. After she left, I thought about it again and again. How could I not know something so simple? That night, when I got home, I replayed the scene in my head, but this time, something clicked. The woman hadn't laughed at me. She had helped me. She was kind. Maybe people weren't waiting for me to fail. Maybe it was just me fighting myself. From that day on, I made a promise: I will make mistakes, and I will make them proudly. So I did. I stopped trying to sound perfect. I just spoke. At the diner, when I didn't know a word, I described it. Instead of napkin dispenser, I said, the thing for paper for hands. People still understood. We laughed together, and they taught me the right word. Sometimes, my co-workers corrected me. Other times, they didn't. But I noticed something important: every time I made a mistake, my English got a little better. I remember one day, Jason said, "Man, you talk a lot more now." I laughed. "Yes, because I am not scared anymore." He smiled and said, "That's the secret." I started to see mistakes as stepping stones, not failures. Every wrong word was just part of the process. I even began to write my funny mistakes in my notebook, Things like I'm boring instead of I'm bored, or I'm exciting instead of I'm excited. I laughed at them instead of hiding them. Soon, something magical happened. The more mistakes I made, the more confident I became. One night, while closing the diner, Sarah told me, "Your English is so much better now. You're even funnier." I smiled and said, "Because now, I speak without fear." And it was true. It was sometime in my 4th month when I noticed something strange and beautiful. I was walking to the bus stop early in the morning, half asleep, and I suddenly caught myself whispering, "It's too cold today. I should have worn my jacket." Then I stopped. Wait, I had just thought that in English, not translated it. Not planned it. It just happened. That small moment felt huge. It was like a switch had flipped inside my head. Before, English had always been like a code, something I had to translate from my first language. Every word took effort. Every sentence required thinking. But now, words started coming naturally, like water flowing through a pipe that used to be blocked. At work, I noticed it too. When customers spoke, I didn't have to translate in my head anymore, I just understood. My brain was finally listening in English. Even my dreams started changing. One night, I dreamed that I was back home, talking to my mother, but we were speaking English. I woke up laughing. It felt surreal, but it showed how deeply the language was taking root in my mind. To strengthen that connection, I began a new habit: English days. Every Wednesday and Saturday, I forced myself to use only English in my thoughts, notes, and conversations. Even when I talked to myself, I used English. At first, it was hard, but soon, my thoughts began to organize themselves differently, more directly, more clearly. I also started journaling entirely in English. Sometimes I wrote about my day, other times about my dreams, fears, or things I wanted to achieve. One entry read, "I feel more confident now. I can express my ideas better. I'm starting to understand jokes and emotions in English." Writing like that made me realize how far I'd come. There were still moments when I didn't know a word, but instead of stopping, I described what I meant. I stopped needing the dictionary every 5 minutes. I started to trust myself. Even the world around me began to look different. Signs, ads, conversations, everything made sense. I wasn't surviving in English anymore. I was living in it. One evening, I was cleaning the kitchen at work while music played softly from the radio. A song came on, "Don't Stop Believin'." I started singing along, perfectly in rhythm. Jason looked over and laughed. "Bro, your English is better than mine now," he joked. We both laughed, but deep inside, I knew something incredible had happened. For the first time since arriving in America, I didn't feel like a foreigner trying to learn English. I felt like someone who belonged in the language. By the 5th month, everything felt different. My English wasn't perfect, I still made mistakes, but I finally felt free. I could walk into a conversation without fear. I could understand jokes, tell stories, and even express my feelings. It wasn't just about words anymore. It was about connection. At the diner, I started talking more with my coworkers during breaks. Before, I used to sit quietly and listen. Now, I joined in. We joked, teased each other, shared food, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. English wasn't something I was studying anymore, it was the bridge that let me belong. One afternoon, Sarah told me about her family and how she grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. I listened closely, and when it was my turn, I told her about my childhood back home, in English. It was the first time I had ever shared something personal in my new language. She listened carefully and said, "Wow, you've come a long way. You tell stories so naturally now." That compliment meant more than she probably realized. It wasn't about pronunciation or grammar, it was about being understood. Outside of work, I began making American friends too. I met some people from the library conversation group, and we started hanging out after sessions, going for coffee, watching movies, or just talking about life. At first, I was nervous. Sometimes they spoke too fast, or used expressions I didn't know. But I learned to stop pretending and just ask, "What does that mean?" They'd laugh and explain, and I'd write it down. Every conversation taught me something new. The more I spoke, the more I discovered something unexpected. English was giving me a new version of myself. I was still me, but in English, I sounded more confident, more direct, even funnier sometimes. I started to enjoy who I was in this new language. One night, a friend told me, "You know what I like about you? You're always positive." I smiled, thinking how strange it felt to receive that compliment, in English. The language that once made me feel small was now letting me shine. That month, I also realized something important: confidence doesn't come after fluency. It comes before it. I didn't wait to be perfect to speak, I spoke, and that's what made me better. English was no longer just a goal. It had become a part of my identity, a bridge between who I was and who I was becoming. Every word I spoke carried a piece of that journey: the mistakes, the laughter, the nights of studying, the early mornings of self-doubt. But now, those struggles felt far away. I was no longer the quiet guy afraid to order food or talk to strangers. I was someone who could connect, communicate, and truly belong. By the end of the 5th month, something beautiful started happening. People began to notice not just my English, but my journey. One afternoon, after the lunch rush at the diner, Jason said, "Man, do you remember when you didn't talk at all? Now you won't stop talking." We both laughed. Then he asked, "Seriously though, how did you do it so fast?" That question stayed with me. For months, I had been focused on learning English for myself, for survival, for confidence, for a better life. But now, I realized my story could mean something to others too. At the library conversation group, new students often arrived, shy and nervous, just like I used to be. One woman from Vietnam struggled to speak and often stayed silent. After class one day, I told her quietly, "I was like you 5 months ago." I couldn't say anything. "Don't worry, it gets better." Her eyes widened. "Really? In 5 months?" I nodded and smiled. "Yes. Just don't stop trying." It felt amazing to encourage someone else, to be the voice I once needed to hear. Soon, I started helping other learners at the diner too. When new workers arrived, some from Mexico, others from India, I would help them with their English. We practiced small talk, restaurant phrases, even jokes. Every time they smiled after saying a new sentence, I remembered how I once felt doing the same. I also began writing short posts online about my experience, how I learned English through music, movies, and people. At first, only a few people read them. But slowly, comments started coming in. "Your story gave me hope. I'm trying to learn too, thank you for sharing this." That's when I realized something powerful: the real purpose of learning is not just to improve yourself, but to help others grow too. I started to see English not as a goal, but as a tool, a way to connect across cultures, to tell stories that matter, to inspire someone who thinks it's impossible. Sometimes, when I walked home at night after work, I thought about that first day, standing in the grocery store, not understanding a simple question. And now, 5 months later, I could hold full conversations, make jokes, and even motivate others. It didn't feel real. But it was. I had done something I once thought was impossible, and now I wanted everyone to know they could do it too. My English journey wasn't just about words anymore. It was about courage. About belief. About becoming someone new. 5 months. It felt like a lifetime, and at the same time, like the blink of an eye. When I first made that promise to myself, "I will speak English in 5 months, it sounded like a dream, maybe even a joke. But now, standing here, listening to my co-workers chatting around me, and joining in without hesitation, I realize something simple yet powerful. I did it, not perfectly, but confidently, freely, and proudly. These days, I don't even notice when I switch between my languages. English has become part of who I am. I think in it, dream in it, and use it to express my thoughts, emotions, and ideas. It's not just a language anymore, it's a new way of being myself. I remember one quiet night after work. The diner was empty, the lights dim, and I sat at one of the tables with a cup of coffee. I took out my first notebook, the one full of messy words and broken sentences. I flipped through the pages and laughed. So many mistakes, so many crossed out lines, so many dreams squeezed into shaky handwriting. Then, on the last page, I saw what I had written 5 months earlier. 5 months from now, you'll speak English. You'll tell your story in English. And there I was, reading those words in English, living those words, being that story.it wasn't just about learning grammar or memorizing vocabulary. It was about discipline, courage, and heart. Every mistake, every awkward conversation, every late night spent watching videos and writing notes, they all built me into the person I had become. English gave me more than communication. It gave me freedom to connect, freedom to dream bigger, freedom to belong anywhere in the world. Sometimes people still ask me, how did you learn so fast? And I always smile and say, I didn't just study English, I lived it. Because that's the truth. I surrounded myself with it, spoke it when I was scared, practiced it when I was tired, and believed in it when nobody else did. Now, I can tell my story, not through translation, but through the language that once felt impossible. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of it, it's this: you don't need to be perfect to be fluent, you just need to be brave enough to keep going. That's what fluency really is. Not speaking without mistakes, but speaking without fear. 5 months changed my life, not because I learned English, but because I learned what I'm truly capable of.